For many, Andor is the pinnacle of Disney-era Star Wars. A story for adults that grew up with Star Wars but didn't become angry nerd bros in middle age. It's infused with much more depth and nuance than the straight-up good versus evil story that began the saga. One of the things I find most interesting about it is that Cassian Andor is, well, just some rando. He's not a cocky rogue having adventures with his trusty sidekick. He's not part of a hereditary line of space wizards or the heir of a wealthy family with political connections. He's just Cassian Andor, lowborn schmo that gets pulled into things beyond his control. It's in this series that the rebellion really gets deconstructed. We see Mon Mothma, still a senator, but one that wields no real influence, even within that neutered Senate. Mostly she's laundering money for the rebellion while keeping up appearances, even going so far as to consider marrying off her daughter to the young son of a gangster.
I'm not asking for betrothal.
Then what are we talking about?
An introduction. Her daughter's 13, she'll soon come of age. Two young people, attractive and privileged Chandrillan citizens.
The old money for status arrangement. Luthen Rael, the vanguard of the rebellion, you might say, is in it to take down the Empire and seems less concerned with what comes after. And he's willing to sacrifice his allies when expedient.
Do we let Krieger go down and play the long game? Or do we warn him and throw away his source that's taken years to cultivate?
His followers are perfectly willing to track down and murder those considered to be loose ends.
Find him.
We can't have him walking around with Luthen in his head.
You mean kill him?
This is what revolution looks like.
And he can't be bargained with because the revolution is his whole purpose.
I burn my decency for someone else's future. I burn my life to make a sunrise that I know I'll never see.
And while the story draws heavily not only on Marxist ideas in history, as Damian Walter has already covered in depth, we shouldn't get too caught up in the young Stalin parallels because Star Wars has always been a historical mashup, a condensation of revolutions and anti-colonial uprisings.
We call them Mujahideen, we call them Al-Qaeda.
When I did it, they were Viet Cong.
And of course, the rebellion has always been influenced in part by the American Revolution.
You know, we're fighting the largest empire in the world.
Right.
And we're just a bunch of hayseeds in coonskin hats that don't know nothing.
By the same token, the Empire, while being the classic example of space Nazis, also have notable Soviet influences, ranging from the palette of their uniforms to the kludgy industrial utilitarianism of their spacecraft. And of course, we can't ignore the straight-up modern American comparisons, from the Vietnam allegory in Return of the Jedi to the tedious and capricious bureaucracy that builds up through the prequels into the Disney era and becomes central in Andor. That he ends up in a labor camp because of a random stop by some stormtrooper with a quota to fill, his sentence half-consciously overseen by some indifferent functionary.
6 years.
6 years? No, wait! But
Change of guidelines.
take him away. I didn't do anything. Hey!
Take it up with the Emperor.
Is one of the most real things to ever be depicted in a Star Wars film or series. We can all relate to it at some point in our lives, being on the receiving end of a capricious and dysfunctional system. It gives substance to its politics. Which makes me back up to a moment at Rogue One that I think carries far more significance in this light.
You can stand to see the Imperial flag reign across the galaxy.
It's not a problem if you don't look up.
It's played as part of Jyn Erso's awakening to the necessity of standing against evil. She needs to stop drifting through life, pick a side, and fight for justice. But I think we need to ask ourselves if maybe she had a healthier outlook than the Zealots. Because we know that the Old Republic was kind of trash. We know the New Republic is just a different kind of dumpster fire. Together, this casts the Empire not as the supreme evil, but rather another iteration on the status quo. The galaxy will be governed badly. The only question is what ideals they fail to implement, who gets the most abuse, and what sigil hangs on the wall. It's become less freedom versus tyranny and more, which kind of failed modernity do you prefer? Or a choice between two garbage political factions that blob into each other far more than either of them likes to admit. Jyn's line verbalizes the wider impression that for the average galactic citizen, Republic or Empire doesn't seem to make a whole lot of difference day to day. So who's the well-adjusted one here? Mon Mothma, has-been legislator trying to claw back the past? Saw Gerrera, wild-eyed revolutionary so unstable even the rest of the rebels don't want to have much to do with him?
His militancy has caused the Alliance a great many problems.
Luthen Rael, obsessed with bringing down the system to the point that he lives a double life and leaves a trail of bodies in his wake. Or Jyn Erso, trying to get on with her life and not make a political alignment her entire identity and reason for being. I'm certainly not saying that we should ignore politics, just shut up and let our betters run the show, only that obsession is unhealthy and makes it easy to justify causing suffering for the greater good.
The Empire has been choking us so slowly we're starting not to notice. The time has come to force their hand.
People will suffer.
That's the plan.
Jyn has some of the reluctant hero that gets pulled into the rebellion for personal reasons thing, but she's still in that Star Wars chosen one mold. She's important mostly because of who her father is. Cassian Andor doesn't have any of that. His quests start out purely personal. When the series begins, he's looking for his sister. He kills a couple local cops because they were scumbags that forced his hand, not out of some political statement. His meeting with Luthen and the subsequent heist was about money, not the revolution. Only after he gets railroaded into the Narkina 5 labor camp does he become fully radicalized. The Empire really had to smack him around, and even then he only joins Luthen when he has nothing else left. He's fighting out of anger and desperation more than idealism. His is a rebellion not of principled white knights fighting for lofty ideals, but angry men who will shiv you in an alley if it furthers their cause. The rebellion is depicted as much more morally gray, willing to blackmail and murder, to sacrifice its own to further its ends.
Everything I did for the rebellion. And every time I walked away from something I wanted to forget, I told myself it was for a cause that I believed in.
At the same time, the Empire stops being the embodiment of evil and instead becomes merely an authoritarian state. Dedra Meero is a great villain not because she's ruthless, but because she's competent and serving the state. She and Luthen are both monsters, but Dedra is a legitimate monster. And Andor's journey to this moment.
Kill me. Or take me in.
Illustrates a truth that all of us, whether historians looking at the past or anyone remotely politically aware today, tend to overlook in our worldview models. Ideologies don't motivate people to fight. They give structure to their pre-existing desire to fight, which isn't to say that people only fight for personal gain. That's grossly oversimplifying it. We fight because we want something, either material or to satisfy some other need. We fight because we've been wronged or had something taken from us and we're angry. We fight to protect things we care about.
Nemik sees oppression everywhere.
Skeen pretends not to listen, but I know the message is sinking in.
Ideology is just the sorting process that happens at the cognitive level after we're already reacting on a gut level. Put crudely, ideology is how we rationalize what we already want to do. And that's the process we see with Cassian Andor. He's not a chosen one hero, he's just a guy that's been shit on too many times and he starts to push back. Of all the Star Wars protagonists over the decades, Cassian Andor is the most directly relatable for most of us, because he is us after a long enough string of really bad days. Let's see how well this ages with Andor Season 2 coming up very quickly. I also want to take a moment to thank the patrons of this channel. It is because of their support that there's no shilling for VPNs or mobile games or whatever in these videos.